Hi, I'm Glenn Garvin, Chief Servant Officer, Life Center Church, and we are in a series called Revision. And the reason we're talking about revision is we are really beginning to lay the groundwork, the tracks for big plans in 2023. And to get there, I want to use Nehemiah. We've been in Nehemiah chapter 1, went through 2, and now we're in chapter 3. And I just want to remind you, great stories have big problems. And big problems require big plans. However, big plans also need big people to work that plan. All the best moments of conflict, battles, and tension require men and women of big faith to work hard and believe in a big God. Is your faith big enough? Is our God big enough? A few may not be willing to risk to even find out. Big people of big faith have always led a spirit-inspired and enabled movement of God in our human history. Well, who chooses to go first? You know, we look at the third chapter of Nehemiah. To most people, Nehemiah chapter 3 doesn't look like a sermon at all. It looks like a list of tasks and people working together on a huge project, and that is true. But here's what I see. I see that the people are the sermon. The people are the plan. Big problems need big plans and big people. And I find that's exactly what happens in this story. Well, I want to let you know there's a familiar story that happens. Maybe it's the first time you put your hands on something with your name in it. To kind of describe it, I want to let you know, back in the old days, there was this thing called a phone book. And in this book, there was a section called the white pages, because the pages were on white paper. Phone companies used to drop it off on your front porch every year, whether you wanted it or not. And whether you used it or not, they still dropped it off. The printed book that included the white pages had a list of people in your neighborhood inside it, and it had their names, addresses, and phone numbers, just in case you wanted to drop them a note or call them up and just say hello, I guess. You had to pay the phone company to be unlisted. You had to pay them to stay out of the white pages. And this thick book of thin pages was paid for by the other section of this book, which gave it the title of this massive print production and free delivery project put out by the phone companies. The book was called the Yellow Pages, and it was very much like the early days of Google. But I want to let you know, when it first started coming around, the first thing that people did was look up their own name. We used to do church photo directories with the classic 4 smiles of family pictures. And when you got it, you always looked up your picture, you looked up your family picture, and you looked up your name. Graduation handouts issued as you come into the stadium or auditorium. You look for your kid's name, award programs, donor plaques, dedication ceremonies, even plays and movie credits. Hey, there's my name in print or lights or scrolling up the screen. Names are what Nehemiah chapter 3 is all about. I counted the names mentioned in chapter 3. I'm not going to tell you yet. Nehemiah lists a lot of names. Names in and of themselves are important. They have meaning. Names were important to the Israelites because they carried the story of God from one generation to another. Names and people from certain cities even had their own reputation. Now, the names that are mentioned in Nehemiah 3, most of the names were just written from, hardworking, loyal to their roots kind of people. Some of the names were from men with high positions and authority in the city and surrounding area. Observation 1 about this before we even get into Nehemiah chapter 3. Leaders go first. Nehemiah 3:1 says this, Then Eliashib, the high priest, and the other priest started to rebuild at the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set up its doors, building the wall as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and the Tower of Hanel. Eliashib goes first. Leaders always go first. Who is Eliashib? Which means God will restore. And why did he go first? You know, in the Old Testament, the primary purpose of the high priest was to serve as a representative, a mediator between the people and God. And he was the spiritual director for the people. And he tended to the temple, and he managed all the comings and goings of the people when they gathered for special events and public animal sacrifices back in the Old Testament for sure, representing a temporary substitutionary payment for sin. That's why the sacrifices were given. And the office was usually passed down from father to son because God had told them it was only one male from one group of people that would serve in this position. They were called the Levites. It was an honored position, but it had been neglected when the temple was destroyed. And it kind of found itself in disrepair, this office even of itself, even in Nehemiah's day. So why did he go first? Was it his job? Or was it his God-given calling? Maybe we'll never know. You know, priests sometimes led Israel even into battle. There's a reference here in Numbers 31, 3 through 6. And Moses had said to the people, choose some men and arm them. But what ended up happening is they chose 1,000 men from each tribe, a total of 12,000 for the battle. Then Moses sent out 1,000 from each tribe. And then what happened is Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, led them into battle. They carried along the holy objects of the sanctuary and trumpets for sounding the charge. So that's what the priests did. They were the ones first often into battle, first to do things because they were the spiritual directors, and so they went first. Observation number 2, people really mattered to God, and they should matter to us. Like I said, Nehemiah mentions a lot of names, individual names, family names, and groups of people from different cities. Here's where I promised I would tell you. Names outnumber the project more than 2 to 1. In fact, the project has mentionings of different words to use, but the project is mentioned 42 different ways and times, versus 70 people's names are mentioned in the Bible. So here's how it kind of breaks down. And by the way, you can get my notes. The notes is really full of a lot of information. You are going to want to get the notes, download them, and here's the link and the QR code for you to get those. Here's the thing. The wall is mentioned 23 times. The gates mentioned 13 times, and the towers are mentioned 6 times. That's a lot. That's only 42 times. But when you look at the names and you look at the family names that are associated, well, that's mentioned 70 times. I just think it's pretty interesting, right? Names directly working on the project, 37 men were mentioned. How many fathers, grandfathers, or family names are mentioned? Again, honorable to who those sons belong to, 34 of those. Cities or areas or groups who sent workers, 70. So I just think that is fascinating, right? The gates are in there, they're 10 times. The towers are in there, they're 4 times. And I'm not going to be able to read all of Nehemiah 3 through 32, but I encourage you to do so. You know why? I'm not going to read it because it reads kind of like a project report for a stockholders meeting because Nehemiah is so detailed in it. But I want to let you know, he writes all about the people, where they were stationed, and what they were doing on the project. That's why it's great for you to read it for yourself. He writes about the leaders. These are prioritized above the others. He scatters them in the text. And even as he writes about them, you get a sense that although they were officials, they worked hand in hand with everybody else, with just the commoners, with just the normal people of the city and surrounding areas. They weren't above, they weren't below, they were right next to them. There were men that are mentioned kind of like mayors at that time. I told you that Nehemiah was actually appointed as a governor from King Artaxerxes. He was the governor of the surrounding of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. And so these men that are mentioned, they were probably like mayors. One of them says, leader of half the district of Jerusalem. And then another place, it's like, well, this is the leader of the other half of the district of Jerusalem. This is why I think they're probably a little bit more like mayors. And there's other leaders that are mentioned. These may be, I call them maybe like county supervisors in our way of looking at it. Because the word says that leader of one half of the district of Beth Sur, and then it mentions the other half of the Ben Sur district is there. So actually the second half of that one's not even mentioned, but we know that the first half was mentioned. So there was probably this one half of the place, the county supervisor was there. And another leader is the district of Keilah, and the leader of the other half of the district of Keilah. Nehemiah also writes in these men who were craftsmen and small business owners. I love this. Like these These guys probably wouldn't have seemed like they would fit for the project. Like maybe they shouldn't be in there because their craft, right, their skill set, their wheelhouse didn't really seem to apply to wall building and what's that called? Brick smithing or whatever. But the Bible specifically, Nehemiah mentions these, a couple of goldsmiths and merchants, and there's even a perfumer, guy that makes perfumes. So Nehemiah also includes comments after some of these people. These were the committed folks, and I feel like they were like footnotes reminding everyone, remember what it took, remember what it cost, remember what it took for these people to sacrifice, to be united in rebuilding the wall. Some individuals and groups are noted for extraordinary work and progress. He notes the men of Tekoa, and he comments in there, though their leaders refused to work with the construction supervisor. So the men of Tekoa got together and they decided they would work even though their leaders wouldn't join them, right? That's interesting to note. The people of Zanoah, led by Hanan, repaired 1,500 feet of the wall. That's a lot of stone stacking. 1,500 feet these guys took on all by themselves. Another one he mentions, Baruch, son of Zabbai, zealously repaired an additional section for the high priest's home. Baruch must have stood out as someone who hustled and worked hard. He gets a footnote in here that he worked zealously and took on additional labor, and that is actually putting together this section that was outside the priest's home. Amazing, right? Nehemiah even gives a shout out to the ladies in here, and I love this one. He says, Shalom, son of Halohesh, and his daughters repaired the next section. So maybe this dad didn't have any sons, and he had daughters, and they're out there working. I am sure there were a lot of women. I am sure that there's a lot of committed daughters, moms that are out there, but these get a specific shout out to do this. So, observation number 3. This message, I want to let you know, is brief because it is really just talking about people. So it would be, again, I want to remind you, it'd be great for you to read the passage yourself. But the observation number 3 that I get is a commitment from all, no matter how large or how small, will eventually build the wall strong and tall. I think that it is about that. It's about each individual person. It's about families. It's about groupings from these territories in these areas. They all made a commitment. Some of them made a huge commitment, and that is noted. And some of them, it just got small commitments, and it was fine. Some of them just worked on locks and doors of the gates of the city. That is fine too. It's interesting because there are quite a few references to folks that were committed to rebuild right outside their home, repairing the section immediately across from his house or across from where they lived. They may have gotten involved right where they live. I think that's what happened. McLaren's exposition commentary wrote this, and I love this. It's written in very old English, but I think you'll get it. McLaren writes this: every man over against his house is the principle I desire to commend to you as going a long way to solve the problem of how to sweeten the foul life of our modern cities. Isn't that amazing? He wrote this really hundreds of, or 50 years ago. I don't know how long it is, but it was old. The foul life of to remedy, to solve the problem, sweeten the foul life of our modern cities. His quote continues in my notes, and it's all in there, but basically he's saying people may say, well, what can I do? Or somebody should do something. The government or business should do something. Nehemiah said to the people there in Israel, let's rebuild the wall. And the men and women did what they could, even repairing sections just outside their own home. I remind you, the problems we face in our country, in our culture, are big. They are really big. But God is faithful. I believe it will take a big plan that requires rebuilding our lives and our families. And finally, I believe it will require big people of faith to believe that God will go before us. I do not believe that politics or politicians will save us. I do not believe that government or education has any interest in helping us. I believe that each man and woman, the young and the old, the single, married, or widowed, can make a decision to do what they can for as long as they can and trust God to make up the difference. I believe this is how life works anyways. I believe in the future when I say, what is going on? What do I think I see? The plans, I will be telling you that. I'll be laying that out in 2023. But I have a huge sense, I believe the hearts and minds of this generation will turn to God and will want to come home. But as a church, we must be ready to receive them, just like the father who runs towards his prodigal son. That's what I see. And I think the pattern is right there in Nehemiah. Chapter 1, both sections in chapter 2 talk about a plan, and now in 3 it's all about the people. The people are the plan. You are the plan. What it looks like, how it's done, is going to be all up to us. You and me, the church, right there on this local church on Candlewood, doing what God wants us to do to be a part of his grand plan. And I believe that he wants to do something spectacular in this generation. Would you join me in that? I want to pray with you. That's it for today. I ask God that bless you, open doors of opportunity, give you favor as you not only let God work in your life, transforming us day by day, getting us closer in a walk with Jesus day by day, but also that he would open doors of opportunity for you and I to participate in the kingdom of God and what he is doing. And that's what I'm going to pray over you. Father, I pray that you would. I pray that you would help fix us. No one else can. No one else can. I pray that you would transform us and change us to the image of your Son, Jesus. And that every day, we would look a little bit more like him as we follow him. We would be followers of Jesus, disciples of Jesus each and every day. But also, God, that you would give us favor. You would bless our lives so that we can accomplish the big things that you have planned for the kingdom of God. It is here now, and it is also coming. But God, I ask that you would pour out your favor. Help us, God, to believe big, to have big faith, and be obedient to what you want us to be doing. In Jesus' name. I hope that encourages you. God bless you today. Have a fantastic week. Reach out to me. Email me, text me, DM me, any way you want to just get a hold of me any way you can. I'd love to respond. All right? God bless you today.